Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of September of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, today we have a lot of interesting details, so let's start. And before we start with the situation on the ground, of course, let's start with the most important update of today, and we're going to talk about the meeting that took place in the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation with the participation of the Minister of Defense, and today Sergei Shoigu gave us new numbers regarding the special operation, regarding the Ukrainians counter-offensive operation, and he gave us just a lot of very interesting things. And the most important is that the Russians are going to continue the special military operation, and according to Minister of Defense, since the beginning of September, just for this September, not full September, the Ukrainians lost 17,000 soldiers, more than 2,700 armed vehicles, including Bradleys, 2 Leopards and 1 Challenger. So the Ukrainians had significant losses, not for the full months. Obviously, by the end of the month, they're going to have more than 20,000 soldiers losses or something around this. And if we calculate and combine the reports of the Ministry of Defense since the beginning of the Ukrainian offensive operation or counter-offensive operation, the Ukrainians lost around 80,000 soldiers, around 10,000 armored vehicles, tanks, personal carriers, Bradleys, Strikers, Leopard, Challengers, and many other types of weapons. Significant losses, and basically during the previous 4 months, the Ukrainians lost completely their 9th and 10th military corps that they prepared and created with the help of the Western countries. But this is also, of course, this is very important for the Russians, the level of losses, that everything is going like according to their Russian plan. But another thing that the Ministry of Defense reported is that the Russians are planning to continue and that they're going to complete the entire collapse of Ukrainian army by the beginning of 2025. So the Russian goal and the goal of the Ministry of Defense is to complete the special military operation within the 2024, within the next year. Of course, this is the goals and the plans of the Russians. But we know, and we have discussed this already in the previous video, that United States of America provided the Ukrainians a special list what they need to do, what they need to complete if they want to save fundings in the next year. So obviously the White House in the United States of America and the NATO countries also have some plans regarding Ukraine. They are not going to close the project by the name of Ukraine. Probably they have some chances, they have some ideas, and they still hope that they can change the situation, that they can change Ukraine, that they can first, before winning the Russians on the ground, they hope that they can win corruption in Ukraine, in Ukrainian hearts and their minds, and after that, after the winning of corruption, they can win the Russians on the ground. They still think about this, and they're doing some steps in this direction. So we'll see whether the Ukrainians are able to complete this corruption and to get some results on the ground within the next year. But when talking about the geolocated videos that we received for today as well, we see complete superiority of the Russians in airfields, in air bombings, in missile strikes, and drone strikes on the ground. Every single field, the Russians have their own superiority. Currently, the Ukrainians don't have any superiority at all in nothing. And first we're going to start with Kherson direction. As we already discussed, in the morning the Russians managed to destroy another MiG-29 of Ukrainian forces in the vicinity of Nikolaev, and today the Ministry of Defense published another video from Kislovka. We have already discussed this video in the previous episode, this scene in the previous video. As a result of strike, something was damaged and there was secondary detonation and a lot of fire. And today the Ministry of Defense published the full version of that video, not like from the night vision type of equipment. The Russians, a lot of explosions, very heavy explosion, and this video we can see the level of explosion, and we see the secondary detonation, and we see why the entire area in the vicinity of this warehouse was burned and set on fire. So probably the Russians managed to get a very powerful ammo depot in Kherson direction. The Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of clashes in this area, the Ukrainians lost 15 soldiers. The level of losses is very low in comparison with the previous days, but the number of updates regarding FAB strikes is still very big. Today the Russians continue, or at least today they published more videos of strikes against the settlement by by the name of Mykolaiivka. Probably these explosions took place maybe in the previous days, and just today they were published. But anyway, the number of updates, the number of FAB strikes in this area tell us just one thing, that the Russians do have some plans regarding this territory, or they're attacking the concentration of the Ukrainian forces, or maybe this is some kind of air bombing or artillery preparation before the Russian operation in this direction. Very difficult to understand because we don't see any movements from the Ukrainian side. We just see the Russian usage of FAB bombs. Another video in Berislav, 2 strikes, that means 2 FAB was sent to the Ukrainian position from another Su-34 of Russian air forces. The Ukrainians published just one video, and according to the author of this video, the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian command center or some headquarters, local headquarters, and as a result of HIMARS strike, that headquarters was destroyed, and Ukrainians are saying that with commanders and generals inside of it. We don't have any numbers and details about this, and to tell the truth, after the Ukrainian speculation regarding the killing of the headquarters of the Black Sea Fleet of Russian Federation, and today, as you know, during the meeting of the Minister of Defense, this person, the head of the fleet of Black Sea, present in that event. Sometimes it's very difficult to believe because of these facts to the words that Ukrainians provide and information they provide as well. Now we are moving further to Zaporozhye area, and today we got a lot of videos, a lot of details from the Battle of Verbova. A lot of videos took place exactly in the western part of Verbova, on the first tree line, on the first and the second tree line in front of the city. A lot of casualties among people, a lot of casualties among soldiers. The Russians are bombing this territory with all types of weapons they have. We will not watch these videos because the fact that a lot of Ukrainian soldiers died for nothing. And why I'm saying for nothing, of course we can say that Ukrainians are fighting for their land. I'm talking not about these global things and global scopes. I'm talking about the tactical operational situation on the ground. And basically the Ukrainians are sending their forces, their soldiers, without cover, without protection of armored vehicles, without protection of artillery strikes, and probably even without protection of FPV drones. The Ukrainians just with machine guns, with grenades, with just regular guns, light guns, try to attack Verbova, but without any success. And the main problem of this situation is the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to send armored vehicles in this area because the Russian control everything. The Russian control the main supply roads, and this this artillery pocket is too small. The Ukrainians don't have possibilities to be flexible and mobile. They don't have. There are maybe 3-4 tactical roads and maybe one strategical road to supply and support this area, and every single road, every single line in this area is under complete Russian FPV drone control and artillery control. And that's why the Ukrainians can't use their artillery systems to attack you see that a truck arrived and in a second the truck was destroyed. So this is the situation. Even if the Ukrainians are able to get inside of this salient, they don't have possibilities to get out of this area. And this is the main problem. This is the main problem why they can't support their offensive forces of 82nd and 71st Brigade in direction of Verbova. Furthermore, there is another problem. For example, today the Russian sources published the video how they managed to discover the Ukrainian artillery system, probably Polish crap or United States Paladin M109, and this artillery system came to its position, and in a few seconds this artillery system was destroyed as a result of Russian counter-artillery fire. So just a few seconds, this artillery system survived or lived just for a few minutes or maybe 1 hour in Orekhov direction. And what is the problem? And the main problem of this situation is that the Ukrainians, when they're attacking the Russian positions from this edge, like Verbova, Rabotina, salient position from this area, the Russians, we saw a lot of videos, have significant possibilities, very nice chances to destroy Ukrainian offensive forces using artillery systems, using Russian artillery systems like D-20, D-30 howitzers, very cheap one, using like Grad systems, very cheap old Soviet artillery systems. They can use them massively. And the most important benefit is that the Russians can, let's say, attack the Ukrainians from the fields between the settlements like Romanovska, Tarasovka, Shevchenko, and Andriivsk. So somewhere from this area, the Russians can attack the Ukrainian offensive forces. There are just 14-15 kilometers, so they can feel themselves pretty well. And the Ukrainians, if they want to support the Ukrainian offensive forces, they need to have at least a few things. First one, they need to have at least armored vehicle support, but they don't have this support because everything is destroyed while moving to the fields. The second thing, the Ukrainians can successfully complete this offensive operation if they have, let's say, their own artillery support. For example, the Ukrainians need to attack, Russian position in Verbovo, but the problem is that the Russians are located in the shelters in Verbovo, so it's not very good to attack because effect and chances to be very successful with these attacks are very low. The second thing that Ukrainians can do is to suppress Russian artillery and not to allow the Russians to bomb the Ukrainians. But for these purposes, the Ukrainians need to attack the same fields between Romanovska, Tarasovka, Shevchenko, and all these cities. And if we calculate the distance, the Ukrainians, for example, need to attack the Russians, let's say from Orekhov, and the distance is around 30 kilometers. So it's optimal distance for the Western artillery to attack from this area. Of course, the Western artillery can attack from within 40 kilometers, but it's too long. It's not so accurate, and it's, of course, you need a lot of time for this to establish positions and so on. So basically, if the Ukrainians want to be successful, they need to attack from this area. And we just seen the video how the Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian artillery system and destroy this with a shell. And the problem is that even if the Ukrainians managed to develop their salient to the south in direction of Robotyne and Novoprokopovka, the Ukrainians still haven't managed to develop their foothold to the west and to the east in direction of the settlements like Kopany, Nestyryanka, Novopokrovka, and Fedorovka. So basically the Russians can attack everything in this small area from their own artillery systems, and they don't need even like D20, D30. It is enough to use maybe even local light mortar systems and just drones. And this is the main problem. The Ukrainians need to attack deeper, and the Russians control the flanks. So this is the problem that Ukrainians haven't managed to fix during the first 3 months. They haven't managed to develop their flanks, and now they have a lot of problems because they can't move their artillery system very close to the salient because they will be destroyed immediately. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in Zaporozhye direction, as a result of artillery bombings, as a result of tall flamethrower system usage, the Ukrainians lost 70 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles, and 2 artillery systems. The interesting thing is that Ukrainians made 2 attacks, according to the Ministry of Defense, in the direction of Verbovo, of 71st Jaeger Brigade, and we have already redeployed this brigade according to this information. And the second update is that the Ukrainians have also redeployed the forces of 36 Marine Brigade, and 36th Brigade used to be located in the vicinity of Velika Novoselovka. We know that currently the Ukrainians stopped any attempt to attack the Russians from this area, so probably they're trying to collect as much as possible reserves, and they're trying to stretch their forces from different directions to Zaporozhye, to Kupiansk, to Donetsk. Yesterday we discussed that Ukrainians have already redeployed forces from Kupiansk in Orekhov direction Zaporozhye as well. So we will move 36 closer to Orekhov, and probably the next attempts to attack from Ukrainian side will be made by 36 Marine Corps Brigade as well. So we'll see. When talking about Vremivka Tactical Brigade, bridgehead, there are no changes. The only thing that we can discuss that the Russians probably start some practicing. Today they published at least 2 videos of accurate strike with Krasnopol rounds, Krasnopol shells in this area. 2 MO depots, probably even a warehouse, were destroyed as a result of very accurate hit. The Ministry of Defense, nobody provided us any numbers, but probably the number of losses were included into the Ministry of Defense report. And now we are moving probably to the most important and interesting area of today. We are going to talk about South Donetsk direction. And today the Russians provided us significant number of episodes and scenes, geolocated videos. For example, in this video, we see how the Russians strike this area. You see 2 strikes. That means that there were 2 fab bombs. Strike Novomikhailivka. The Russians continue reducing this area till ruins, and I expect one more time that today, tomorrow, in a month, in a week, the Russians will launch their offensive operation. Another area, Konstantinovka, also 2 strikes, which means that the Russians use another 2 fab bombs in this area. Another SMO depot was destroyed as a result of that attack. And Yevgenievka. On this sphere, it's very difficult to understand what exactly the Russians were using. Maybe that was the strike of missile, or maybe artillery system with the secondary detonation of SMO depot in this area. But anyway, probably it was also fab, because all strikes took place on the same line, like this one. So basically, the Russians, Su-30 or Su-34, Su-30 were using the same route to attack. Probably this aircraft started on Rostov, then it go on like attack distance, and from somewhere from this direction, the Russians on the same line made 3 attacks and 3 launches of FAB 500 with FAB guided. 3 guided attacks with guided bombs in this direction. So probably something like this took place in this area. Furthermore, the Russians managed to destroy another Ukrainian artillery system. So we see complete collapse of the Ukrainians on every single front line. We don't see nothing from the Ukrainian side. The only video that the Ukrainians published is that how they were bombing and attacking the Russian forces in the vicinity of coal mine that the Russians took place as a result of their attack in the beginning of June. After that, the Ukrainians made few attempts to counterattack, but all the Ukrainian attempts were repelled by the Russians, and currently the Russians have 100% control over this territory. They found a solution how to support and supply their forces with FPV drones. They're sending food, cigarettes to this area. So like there is an entire system. And also the Ukrainians lost another like SMO depot somewhere in the forest behind Krasnogorovka, which also is a primary target for the Russians for the next phases of the Russian offensive operation. Now we are moving to probably a very interesting area, to Klishchevka, Andreevka, Bakhmut direction, and today we got a lot of videos, a lot of details, and a lot of things to discuss. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation reported that as a result of clashes on Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 310 soldiers. Significant number of losses, of course less than in comparison with the previous day. And today the Ukrainians, just listen to the numbers, lost 18 armored vehicles, including 5 tanks on Donetsk direction. Significant number of losses, very difficult to understand, at least when the Ministry of Defense provided these numbers, it was very difficult to understand where exactly the Ukrainians had this level of losses, such a heavy level of losses. And somewhere at noon time, maybe at 4 p.m. of the local time, the Russian sources published very interesting video. I suggest us to watch this video from the beginning, because this video has a lot of details and a lot of very interesting and important information. On this video, we see the area in the vicinity of Andreevka. On the first scene, we can see at least 4 or maybe 5 destroyed armored vehicles somewhere in the vicinity of Andreevka along the railways. So this episode confirms that Ukrainians made an attempt to penetrate the Russians' defense belt along the railways. They were trying to crack the Russian defense and to encircle the Russian positions somewhere in this area we will discuss later. Another armored vehicle was destroyed right in front of the city. Maybe this is like Russian armored vehicle, maybe it's Ukrainian who managed to cross the railways, but after that was destroyed as a result of attack of anti-tank missile. On the south of Andreevka, it's like a real area with a lot of destroyed vehicles, at least 5 I have calculated, or even 7, as a result probably artillery strike, anti-tank weapon, and of course in the vicinity of Andreevka itself at least 4 or 5 armored vehicles also were destroyed. So the Ukrainians during the previous 48 hours made significant attempt to penetrate the Russians' defense belt and to capture to put like a final end point in the story of the battle for Andreevka. But the Ukrainians, as you can see according to this video, were heavily defeated with significant number of losses, at least among armored vehicles. On this video we don't see the dead bodies of Ukrainian soldiers, so maybe they managed to evacuate them, or maybe the Ukrainians managed to get positions among the trees. And on the final scene of this video we see that like a fire, like one T-72 is on fire, and maybe one armored vehicle is also on fire. What did happen there? The thing is that the Ukrainians lost significant number of armored vehicles, but during the night, of course, upcoming night, they had possibilities to evacuate these armored vehicles and to repair them. And the Russians, of course, understood that they don't want to give the Ukrainians possibilities to evacuate these armored vehicles, and basically all those tanks were destroyed as a result of artillery fire, as a result of FPV drones, just one purpose: not to allow the Ukrainians to evacuate. So now let's return to the map and let's discuss this attack one more time. Basically, the Ukrainians made at least 2 attempts to attack, and they have almost complete this mission. First attack took place in this area, and exactly in this area we saw at least 5 or 6 destroyed Ukrainian armored vehicles who was trying to cross the railways. The second single armored vehicle was abandoned somewhere in the vicinity of this area. Also, the Ukrainians managed to cross the railways, but they haven't managed to dig very deep inside of the Russian territory, and also that armored vehicle was destroyed like along the railways. And a lot of armored vehicles were destroyed on the southern part of Andreevka, which also the Ukrainians tried to use, maybe to attack the Russian positions from the south. What was the main purpose of the Ukrainians? Obviously, the main purpose of the Ukrainians was to capture this area, underground facilities that located below the railways, this area. As we discussed many times in the previous videos, the Russians still control this territory, and today the Ukrainian sources published the video how the Russians were trying to evacuate their wounded soldiers somewhere from this area. This video is geolocated. We see the entrance into the Russian underground facilities, and the Ukrainians can't continue further offensive operation in direction of Kurdyumovka, Zaryanovka, Mykolaievka, Opotne until they secure and until they solve the issue with this underground Russian position. We see that the Russians still have operational reserves in this area. They're not going to step back, and basically the Ukrainians were trying to cross the railways from the north and to encircle the Russians, like making a small hook. And the same attempt they were trying to make from the south. They was trying to cross the railways and to encircle this area from the south. But at least the northern group of Ukrainian army managed to get the railways where they were completely destroyed. But the southern one hasn't even managed to get the railways. And the Ukrainians had significant number of losses, and the Russians managed to save their presence and their positions in the vicinity of the underground tunnel, underground facilities along the railways in the vicinity of Andreevka. Furthermore, the Ukrainians made another attempt to attack the Russian positions on the north of Klishchiivka, and there was a very fierce clashes in the vicinity of the railways and the railway station of Klishchiivka and the tree lines in this area. And when talking about this direction, the Ukrainians managed to get some success. They managed to force the Russians to step back, and currently the Ukrainians control the railways and the railway station, the tree lines. But I'm not going to color this territory in yellow, at least for today. We need more days, we need more, at least one day of confirmation the Ukrainians managed not just to capture and to force the Russians to step back, and also to save control, and after that we will color this territory in yellow. Anyway, we have the first geolocation evidence that the Ukrainians managed to do something and to get some success on this at least sector. When talking about southern, they were completely defeated. Before these two attacks, the Ukrainians tried to establish some fire control over the roads, the main supply roads in this area, and as a result of FPV drone strikes, artillery strikes, the Ukrainians managed first to discover, then to destroy a lot of Russian mortar positions, tank positions. They destroyed a lot of supply and support cars that the Russians were using to support the Russian forces during these attacks, and so on. But as we see, those things were not enough for the Ukrainians to penetrate this defense belt, and I believe that tomorrow the Ukrainians will try to make another attempt to complete the story, at least of Andreevka. But I'm not sure that the Ukrainians, of course, are able to do this. Now we are moving to Kupiansk-Liman direction. There are no changes on the ground, the same situation. The Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of clashes on these two directions, the Ukrainians lost 140 soldiers. In comparison with the previous day, the level of losses is higher, of course higher, but we don't have any videos from the ground, just few FPV drone strikes of the Ukrainian forces. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian tank in the vicinity of Chernovo-Popovka, Tirny, somewhere in the triangle between these settlements, and as a result of FPV drone strike, the Russian T-64 tank was destroyed, and nothing special, no changes on the ground. And the same story somewhere in the vicinity of Kovalyovka. The Ukrainians managed to discover among the 3 lines the position of Russian armored vehicles, at least 2 armored vehicles the Russians were trying to hide, and as a result, the FPV drone, 1 personal carrier or armored vehicle, was destroyed, but without any changes on the ground. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the storming process of Sinkovka and the settlement by the name of Petropavlovka. Yes, and you know that we need to mention the report of the Ministry of Defense. As I understand, the Kupiansk offensive operation maybe was prepared by him, or he was involved into the preparation of this operation. For example, in this video we see how the Russians destroyed another bridge in this area, or maybe they destroyed the previous bridge, who knows. But the Ministry of Defense reported, as a result of clashes in the vicinity of Sinkovka and Petropavlovka, the Russians managed to develop their positions. He mentioned that there were no updates about capturing the city or control of the city, just managed to develop their positions around the city. So we'll see whether these developments will allow the Russians to capture them, but for now, no changes on the ground in this area as well. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.